I've been working in schools in the UK and around Europe for over 25 years, and my role, I think, has developed over this time. At the very beginning, I thought my role was training teachers to use certain restorative techniques to help youngsters resolve conflicts, to address behavioral problems, and then it began to change, and I began to realize that my role was also to give them the skills in their classrooms to change the environment in the classroom and to facilitate community building circles. Actually, the kind of things that I used to do when I was a teacher, using what we would call restorative skills to develop connection, communication, emotional literacy. And the more teachers were able to do that kind of thing in their classroom, the less conflict, the less challenges there were. So actually, although what we do we call restorative, it's been evolving into also what we now call relational practice. So it's both relational and restorative. But as time went on, I also began to realize that in order for teachers to be able to model this in their classrooms and to think in a restorative way to help youngsters put things right, they themselves needed support. And if there are teachers listening to this, they will recognize that within staff teams there is conflict. There are communication difficulties. And so we began to refocus our attention and actually train the teachers to use these skills, not just with the students, but with themselves. Communication skills, conflict resolution skills, to create staff rooms or staff teams that looked after each other and cared for each other, which was also developing the resources of the staff team, because teaching is a very challenging job. And then, probably most recently, because of all the research that's been done about restorative practice in schools, which is showing that the most important people are the leaders, we began to realize that the first work is with the leaders. And so when I begin to work with a school, I work with the leaders maybe for a day or more, working with them on how do you communicate with your colleagues, your fellow leaders, the principal, the deputy principal. How do you manage conflict? Who helps you if you are in conflict? And then, of course, other jobs the leaders have, like communicating with parents. How is that? How do you manage anger, distress with parents and carers? So, in order to be an effective trainer working in the school environment, you need to be able to support leaders, support staff, in order that they can then use their restorative skills with the students. So it's not about the trainer working directly with the students. It is about the trainer training the adults in the school. And so you're not just a trainer. You're also a consultant, a critical friend, a supporter of the school, because the job is going to take, they say, between 3 to 5 years. So you begin a relationship with the school as a consultant and a trainer. So this is the nature of the job that I have learned about over 25 years. Because of the nature of the job that I've just explained, it's absolutely vital that anyone who is going to become a trainer needs to have competence in restorative practices, and I'll explain the range that we train people to use, competent, confident, and has the credibility to work with leaders, which takes competence and credibility, as well as teaching staff. So when I am going to, if somebody expresses an interest in training with me to become a trainer, the first thing I invite them to do is to attend my course. And I have developed a model over many years, which I won't go into the model now. It is in some of the books I have written, but it's built on 5 core beliefs, which then inform fundamental building blocks of the school, but also 5 key steps of restorative practice. And then various applications, how you listen. Well, first of all, the restorative mindset, how you think when someone is behaving in a distressed way or an angry way. There's a whole lot of ways of thinking that is different. Also, how you listen. And the 5 steps that I explain to people can also inform a way of listening to somebody individually. And this can be used in preparation for a meeting, a restorative meeting, or it can be used for supervision, it can be used for support, it can be used to help people debrief troubling incidents, it can be used with children, with adolescents, with adults. And then also there's mediation skills, bringing people face to face, sitting people in circle and working with small groups of students who fall out and need someone to help them solve things, and also the proactive community circles I was talking about earlier. Now, in order to be a trainer of these things, you need to be competent in doing all of those things and have a track record of doing it. You can't stand in front of a group of people training them in these things if you don't know what you're doing. It's like learning to drive, stepping out of the car after you passed your test and putting a sign on your car saying, "I am now a driving instructor." No one would come to you. It would be dangerous. You need to know how to drive really well before you become an instructor. So my advice is you attend some basic training, you learn all the skills, you then do as best as you can to maybe go and speak to a school and say, can I try my skills out? And maybe 3 months, 6 months, maybe more, of practice. And it's not just about competence in the skills. It's experiencing the response you get, the resistance you get in schools, because many teachers fear change and there will be resistance. So you need experience in managing those conversations with staff. And you also need to be able to talk with passion about the fact that this works. And if you haven't tried this out for yourself, you're not going to be convinced. So that's why it might take you many, many months of experience, and then you're ready to train as a trainer. So that would be the most important thing, I think, is being a competent practitioner yourself, and actually to stay a practitioner. You know, I've been training now, as I say, for 25 years, and I still am also a practitioner. I still use my skills. I use my skills in the training, because actually I'm a great believer that we are modeling restorative values and principles in the way we train. I call it restorative pedagogy. But I get asked to run meetings, circles, mediation, so that I keep my practice alive. I think that's very important. So I'm currently supporting teams of trainers in different countries. And over the time of COVID, it's been quite a challenge, although in many ways I've also learned quite a lot. I have in the past trained trainers who come back after this experience of practice, like I explained, and we meet together for 1 week, and I divide up the training manual. I have written a training manual of maybe over 200 pages that explains exactly how to train this bit, this bit, this bit. What we did was meet in the room, and I'd say, okay, or I would send them some preparatory information, and I would divide up the group and say, okay, group A, choose 3 people. Your role is to deliver module 1 or a bit of module 1, because I divide the course into modules. And you will do that for half a day. And then the second half of the day, we will, all the rest of us who you have been training, will give you some feedback, and we will grow together. We will learn together. And I encourage them to be flexible, to be creative. And then the next day, the next group delivers some aspect of module 2, and so on. Yeah, so each day, a new group will take part of a module, and they will design the half day or whatever, and they will deliver it to all of us, and we will give them feedback. Now, it's okay, but the problem, of course, is that this group of people are training people who are not beginners. They are training people who are already trained, and so you don't get the same response, the same reaction as you would if you were training beginners. You won't get the difficult questions. You won't get the resistance. And although the people in the room are trying to act naturally, they already know what they're doing, and that's a particular challenge when it comes to the role play, because they know what they're doing. They could pretend to make mistakes, but it's not natural. So I've always been a little bit concerned about this model of training for trainers. Now, we have COVID. I was due, for example, to travel to several countries to train trainers in this way. I couldn't go. But the group there was super keen to become trainers. And so I thought, okay, what do I do? And in the end, I thought, you know what, Belinda, you need to trust people. They are intelligent. They are competent practitioners by now. Why don't you just throw them in the swimming pool and see if they can swim? And they were super keen to try. So I sent them the training manual, and we agreed that I would do some supervision, which was online, with them, and it could be regular meetings, but in the room. But with this, it was online. They took each module. They discussed with themselves how they were going to do it. They delivered it, and then they met with me and their colleagues to debrief how it went. And it was very successful. I've done this with several different training groups in several different countries, and I learned to trust them. And they used my manual, and the feedback it's very helpful. And they have grown so much in confidence and in competence, and in competence, not incompetence. And all they needed was some support from me on a regular basis to debrief what they were doing. So I actually think that that's a better model now, that I give them the training notes, and also, again, encourage them to be innovative if they want to make some changes. But basically, the modules are very clear. The program is clear. I also encourage some creativity in the design, because I'm not a manual person, actually. And although I follow the program, some days I might do this on one day, but not the next thing, because the group's not ready for it. And I think as a good trainer, you need to be very responsive to the group. And if the group is more ready for something you were originally going to do on day 3 or day 4, and you think it needs doing on day 1, fine. I think that's good training practice. So yeah, in answer to the question about following up, first, offering regular supervision for the group is I think good practice. Just as you would after initial training. I think after initial training, people need regular refresher meetings as well. And then also just trust people. Trust people to look after each other. And eventually, of course, they will develop the skills using restorative circle practices and using the 5 steps or whatever to be able to look after each other. And we gradually sit back. And one super exciting thing I've just now experiencing for the first time is one of the groups I support in one of the countries that I've worked in are now saying to me, we would like to train trainers ourselves. So now I am training the trainers of trainers. And this is a new experiment for me because, first of all, I thought, I haven't done this before. I haven't got a manual for training the trainers of trainers. But we had a meeting online and they told me what they were going to do. And I just went, wow. I can't add anything. I'm here for you to ask me questions, but you know what you're doing. So I think it's trusting people once you've given them everything that they need to take off for themselves. It's absolutely vital that that sort of thing is discussed in training. I have had on a number of occasions real conflict that has occurred in the training room. And I think as trainers, we must not shy away from that. We are there to train in the field of conflict resolution and mediation and restorative practice. And if a conflict occurs and we ignore it, then everybody knows it's there. And what are we modeling? What do we model? We are modeling conflict avoidance, when in fact it's the perfect thing. Now, can you manufacture it? I'm not sure. But on quite a few occasions in my training experience, something has happened. And I most often train by myself, so it's quite easy for me to make that decision myself. I have occasionally worked with other trainers, so we have to have a conversation. How are we going to do it? I'll give you an example. I won't mention the country. We were training in a country and we had done a learning agreement at the beginning, and we had discussed respect and cooperation, and part of that for me was people arriving punctually. And me and my fellow trainer, we were always in the training room at the time that we had agreed to come back after coffee. And little by little, day after day, we noticed that maybe 5 minutes had gone by, nobody. 10 minutes had gone by, nobody. And maybe quarter of an hour, 20 minutes later, people would gradually come in from the coffee. And we thought, well, we have agreed punctuality. What is the point? And if you are a mediator and you agree certain ground rules in the context of your restorative meeting, and people violate those rules, you would do something. You would, and obviously, there are ways of doing this. I won't go into that now. There are ways of doing it in a polite, respectful way. But you cannot let people violate, for example, the rule of being respectful or attacking. Yeah, you can't. You have to hold the boundaries. So as a trainer of restorative practice and as a trainer of trainers, you need to model how to challenge and respect boundaries. And so in this case, when people eventually all came back from the coffee, we my colleague and I had agreed we would do a restorative circle. What does that mean? It means taking up the talking piece and saying what has come up for us. And we noticed that we agreed you'd come back at 11, and we noticed that you came in at 11:15. And that is a problem for us because we agreed punctuality. And we passed the talking piece round to everybody. And it was super uncomfortable. I mean, it was not an easy thing to do because people were really angry. Because I think they felt guilty actually, but they also felt challenged. And there was some cultural difficulty as well about management of time. So the first round was, what's the situation for you? Second one was, what thoughts and feelings are coming up? And there was a lot of anger in the room. Then, who is affected when we agree to come back at a certain time and people don't come back for 20 minutes or so? And then I bring out my needs cards. I use cards with needs on them, and we looked at the needs, and then we went into problem solving. And the group, by this time, they also realized that this was a really useful example. They said, well, actually, we haven't seen each other for a long time. This was a refresher course. Actually, we need more time. We need more time. So we want you to make the coffee break longer. We know this might mean we have less time doing other things, but we want you to make the coffee break longer. And we need help. We need reminding the time because we get so animated in our conversations. And somebody who had a watch and a necklace with a watch said, I like timekeeping. I will be the person who will tell everyone that the time is right to come back in. So that was how we resolved it. I think that was one of the most important lessons that these people learned from the whole process, is that how to solve a problem in a class. Because I used to do this when I was a teacher. I didn't realize it was restorative practice. But if something cropped up in my classroom, we'd sit down and we'd all discuss basically the process I just described. I sort of did it instinctively because I believed in the democratic process. So if it's almost like I'm saying to you as trainers of trainers, that if there is any kind of disagreement or conflict, seize it as an opportunity to stop the course, or not stop the course, see this as a learning opportunity. And if one doesn't happen, then maybe you have to invent one. But you must give trainers the confidence to be able to handle something like this. It's quite hard. It's quite hard, especially if the conflict is with you, the trainer. But it is possible. It is possible. It is possible to hold a process in which you are also involved if you have a key quality of a trainer, which is humility. And to be able to sit and think, I'm not going to defend myself. I hear there is anger. I hear there is maybe some disagreement. Let's use a restorative process to explore it. And I think people will probably feed back at the end of the course that it was the most useful learning. I think the failures I've experienced have been when a school doesn't fully appreciate how much investment of time, energy, commitment, and money. Schools pay me, my organisation, for the training. and somebody has to pay. So if the school is getting a grant from somewhere else, that grant has to keep coming. Because if you don't realise that the project was not even a project, the transformation of the whole school, the culture of the classroom, the culture of the staff room, the culture of the leaders' offices, if you don't realise that's going to take between 3 and 5 years, and put in the investment for training, for time for looking at policies and procedures, if you don't put in that commitment and you don't keep on supporting the staff to try things out, to meet in groups, to reflect on their practice, if you don't do all that, it won't happen. And if you like, the biggest disappointments for me, we call them failures, I'm not sure if it's a word failure, the biggest disappointment for me is if I've only been called in for a short time, and then for some reason the funding goes, or they can't get the funding and they can't continue, and then it goes away. And the other huge disappointment for me is if I have been working for a school. I have some schools I have been working with now for 15 years, 18 years. And I've been very happy that the even though the personnel has changed, the restorative fire has kept burning, if you like. The new principal has handed on the baton, like in the Olympics, to the new one. But it breaks my heart when a school has done everything they can, and then a new head teacher comes in and their ideas are different, and they sweep it all away. And that breaks my heart, because things go back to punishment, to exclusion, to toxic stress, to staff burnout, all the things that have been addressed. There's so many things that can happen if a school is totally restorative, in terms of raised attainment, raised attendance, a reduction in staff absenteeism, in increased feeling of safety, staff satisfaction in their work, all those things. And suddenly, boom, it's gone, because the new head teacher wants to bring in what I call a power and control process. And then my heart is broken. And yeah, so those are the kind of failures. In terms of training, I think if one follows the things I've been talking about, you should be okay. You should be okay. Trust the restorative process. Trust the process. And that also means remembering that as the trainer, I don't have all the answers. Trust the group, use the restorative process, and work with them. If things go wrong, work with them. Definitely, that will be the way forward.